Aramaic is a cousin of the Hebrew, and I'm not saying a brother, because Hebrew belongs to, let's say, the Canaanite family, or the Canaanite group within the subfamily that is known as the Semitic languages. Canaanite is the immediate family of the Hebrew, and outside that family, in the first cousin level, you have the northwestern Semitic languages. Hebrew is a northwestern Semitic language, as well as the Aramaic. They both belong to that group of languages. And they actually have a very long history of living side by side, and Aramaic, mainly Aramaic affecting Hebrew, okay? Rather than, I cannot say that there is equal relationship and influences of both sides, but mainly Aramaic affected Hebrew. It was a lingua franca of the ancient Near East at a certain period, okay? And usually, again, there are different opinions as far as the periodization of the Aramaic, but the common practice is to divide the Aramaic into 5 chronolects. Ancient Aramaic or Old Aramaic, roughly between the 10th century and the end of the 8th century, okay? Imperial Aramaic, roughly between 700 BCE all the way to 200 BCE. Middle Aramaic, 200 BCE all the way to 200 of the Common Era. Late Aramaic, 200 to 700 of the Common Era, roughly. It's easy. 700 to 2, 200 to 200, 200 to 700, okay? And modern Aramaic, which is 700 roughly, all the way to our time. That's the main chronolects, or main divisions according to periods of time. There is also a division according to East and West within the Aramaic, okay? And let's talk about each of these periods briefly, okay? And we'll see documents from these periods. So, ancient Aramaic or Old Aramaic, we don't have a lot of material in ancient Aramaic, but we have several, around 30 different inscriptions, okay, of contracts, of kings who wrote, okay, about 30, as we said, 30 inscriptions. This is on screen Kilamua inscription. There are other, the Sphera, the Sphera contract, or known as also the Sujin inscription, and other inscriptions. I'm not getting into the linguistic aspects distinguishing the ancient Aramaic or the Old Aramaic from the Imperial Aramaic. I'll just say, maybe mention a few. Some of the consonants were pronounced differently, and some of the consonant shifts have occurred have not yet, or are different, I would say, from Imperial Aramaic. I would say that the influences of the Akkadian over the Aramaic, as they are presented in the Imperial Aramaic, are not as salient when talking about Old Aramaic. And again, our knowledge of the language is limited, because it is only in about 30 inscriptions. that were found. I want to talk about Imperial Aramaic. That is related to the discussion that we might have on Thursday. Okay? The first empire that starts using the Aramaic for purposes of writing official documents is the Assyrian Empire. Again, it is not the official language of the Assyrian Empire. The official language of the Assyrian Empire would be Akkadian, generally speaking, and the Aramaic will become the official language of the Persian Empire. So when people talk about Imperial Aramaic, it is because of the Persian Empire, but the process that will eventually lead to the Persian Empire adopting the Aramaic, which wasn't its own language. Okay, the Persians had Persian. They were Persian speaking. Persian is, I'll maybe put it in a way that is more memorable. Persian is closer to English than to Hebrew. Okay? It doesn't mean that it is close to English, but it's closer to English than to Hebrew, or than to Aramaic, for that matter. And yet they have decided to adopt the Aramaic as their official language of the Persian Empire. Why did they decide to do that? Because of the processes that started with the Assyrians. The Assyrians started using the Aramaic as kind of a second language for official letters because the Aramaic became popular. So in the 8th century, the Aramaic becomes popular. By the end of that century, the Assyrians are already making use of it for diplomatic needs. That we know, obviously, from 2 Kings chapter 18. We all remember that verse when Rav Shakeh is sent by Sennacherib from Lachish to Jerusalem to speak with the people of Jerusalem, and he is talking and he is speaking in which language, guys? He's speaking to the listeners, to the people on the walls of Jerusalem.
In Hebrew.
Nah, in Judean.
Judean, okay.
Right. In Judean, which is Hebrew, which is biblical Hebrew that was spoken in the language in the land of Judah. Again, we can talk about slight differences, but you're right. Hebrew, which is Judean, he speaks Judean, and the officials, they tell him, listen, don't speak Hebrew, speak Aramaic. We understand it. Why do they understand Aramaic? Did they grow up in an Aramaic speaking environment? No, it was used for international purposes, okay, for diplomatic purposes. So the officials, we're not surprised to learn that the officials, they knew Aramaic. And so they ask him to speak Aramaic, and he says, no. I came to speak to the people, not to you guys. I'm speaking over your heads. I think that we can relate to that with modern politicians not addressing their public through mainstream media, both in Israel and in America and elsewhere as well. People, the politicians are now trying to go around or over those traditional means of communication directly to speak to their followers through their smartphones, right? They go on the whichever platform they have, and they go directly to the person. They don't want the mediation of other people, be that the officials of the land of Judah, or be that like the traditional TV stations. Again, not specific politicians. There are obviously politicians that come to mind may do it more or better than others, but every politician would love the opportunity to speak directly to the people he's trying to convince and not through a medium. So it's already, what Rav Shakeh is doing 2,700 years ago. Anyway, that's Imperial Aramaic, and we find Imperial Aramaic in a lot of inscription, a lot of writing, on a lot of different materials, in different places in practically all of the ancient Near East, many different places in Central Asia, including Afghanistan, or including Iran, including Egypt. This, for instance, is um, is a letter essentially from Egypt. Okay, from Yeb. Okay, a colony of Yeb, a colony of Jewish Persian soldiers who were put in the island of Elephantine, or by its Egyptian name Yeb, to keep things in order under the Persian rule in Egypt. Okay, this is the reason we find Aramaic in the Bible, in Ezra and Daniel. Okay, because it was indeed the official language of the Persian Empire. We find also a verse in Jeremiah and 2 words in Genesis. That's biblical Aramaic, is part of what we call Imperial Aramaic. Specifically, this letter is from the community of those Jews in Elephantine to the governor of Judea, asking them for assistance to rebuild the temple that they had in Elephantine. Okay, we're talking about 408 before the Common Era. This is the date of the letter here, and it's written in Aramaic. You can see, by the way, that the script is somewhere in between the ancient Hebrew or ancient Aramaic script and script that we're used to. Okay. Okay. Middle Aramaic. Remember. Yes, Danny?
Was Imperial Aramaic also the official language of the Babylonians before the Persians?
No. It was, again, used in this region, but it wasn't their official language.
But the Babylonians used it as well.
Yeah, they used it because it was used in the region.
Thank you.
Okay. So the Middle Aramaic, we have the language of the Targumim, right? The early translations of the Bible. We have the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have the language of the Nabateans. Okay, we have other other sources that are in Middle Aramaic. The words of Jesus in the New Testament, right? When Jesus is quoting Psalm 22, he says, Eli, Eli, lama
sabachthani.
Right. What is the Hebrew for that?
Is it Sabatani?
No, that's Aramaic, guys. The Hebrew for that is azavtani. Eli, Eli, lama azavtani. If you open your Psalm 22, you'll see the Hebrew word is azavtani.
I didn't know why they transliterated it that way in the New Testament, Netanel, because I looked it up and it was a different word.
Right. So it's not a transliteration, it's a translation, because Jesus was saying the Aramaic word for that, which is shabaktani. Okay. Why did you let me go? Okay. Why did you forsake me? Right. When It's also in Biblical Aramaic. We have that root. It's not unique to Middle Aramaic. When Darius, okay, is letting to the people of the Transjordan and Rechum and Shetar Boznai and all of their colleagues, and he says to them, let go of the work of the house of God, okay? He says, Shevuku la'avidat bet elahadech. Shevuku, the same as Eli Eli lama shevaktani. Okay, that's the Aramaic, and again, talita, okay, talita kumi, right? Talieta or talita, that's Aramaic. That's Middle Aramaic, to be specific, Middle Aramaic, okay? Late Aramaic. Moving on to the next dialect that we've mentioned, Late Aramaic. And, oh, I see the question. Is the Great Isaiah Scroll from the caves in Aramaic? Don, I know you're going to see it soon, right?
Okay,
You want me to ruin the surprise?
not at all.
But I will. It's in Hebrew. It's in Hebrew. It's not in Aramaic. It's the Great Isaiah Scroll is in Hebrew. There are some scrolls that are in Aramaic, but the biblical scrolls are in the same language as they are in the Bible. We do have some Aramaic translations or apocryphon of Genesis, and we have some Aramaic translations of biblical works that were found in Qumran. But the Great Isaiah Scroll is in Hebrew, and let me tell you a secret. It's not really a secret. When you come to the Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem, Don, right?
Absolutely.
You'll see the big scroll in the middle, right?
I've not been there yet.
So when you come there, you'll see a big scroll in the middle, the Great Isaiah Scroll. It's not the real one. It's not the real. They keep the real one in a safe and everything because it has to be like in certain conditions and so forth. So the one you have at the top is a copy. It's not the real one, but you know it's a copy of the same thing. So I don't know if I've ruined it for you, but still it is impressive. It is beautiful. They do present some of the original scrolls as well, and at the bottom you have the Aleppo Codex. Again, they don't keep the whole codex there. You just have like page or two, and the rest of the pages are somewhere else. Right, but definitely Shrine of the Book. I remember I have the dates where you were, where you're in Jerusalem marked, and you have a Monday in Jerusalem. We'll try to make it the evening of that Monday that we meet or something. Okay, we'll be in touch. We'll talk about that.
Sounds real good.
And everybody else is invited as well, guys. On Monday when Don is in Jerusalem, come. I don't know what we'll do, but we'll try to do something interesting. Okay, so late Aramaic. We've talked about Middle Aramaic. We've mentioned Jesus. We've mentioned the text from Qumran. We've mentioned other things that are important. Now, when talking about the late Aramaic, is a good opportunity to talk about the division not just into chronolects but into regional dialects or geographic dialects, east and west. Okay, and the eastern dialect of Aramaic was spoken in the area of Babylon. Okay, so it included the Aramaic of what is today the Babylonian Talmud. Okay, it was the language of the Jews in the area of Babylon. and it is the language of the Babylonian Talmud, which I'm sure we've mentioned in the past, and I know you've heard of it. And it is also the language of the Syriac translation, or the Syriac in general. It's a Christian dialect. That is the language of the Peshitta. Here is the Peshitta for the Book of Ruth. And if you've seen my video about Saint Mark Monastery and Church in Jerusalem, you've seen Syriac there as well. Okay. There is, again, I'm not an expert on Christianity, but there is the Syriac Church and then the Assyrian Church of the East. Anyway, both of them use the Aramaic as their language. There is also Mandaic. Mandaic, for instance, this is an incantation bowl with a Mandaic text. The Mandais are a Gnostic sect. This, by the way, is they still exist. They used to be mainly in Iraq. I have a friend who is in Sweden, who is Mandai. Okay, student. Now, okay, right. That's the Mandai. In the West, okay, we've talked about the East so far. In the West, we have also division of dialects according to religions. So there is the Galilean Aramaic, in which the Jerusalem Talmud is written, the Talmud that is referred to sometimes as the Palestinian Talmud. That was before the word Palestine had such a political undertone to it. The connotation was just the area which the Romans called Palestine, which is Israel. So that's the Jerusalem Talmud. Some of the homilies of the rabbis, some of the poems, and so forth. There was Samaritan Aramaic, the dialect in which the Aramaic dialects of the Samaritans. There is Christian Aramaic that was used here as well as a Western dialect. Okay, there is Aramaic that we find in other areas of Judah, but essentially that's the division between East and West. Now getting into modern Aramaic. What happened to the Aramaic? In the 7th century, something very important happens that affects the whole Middle East up until this very moment. What happens in the 7th century, guys?
Islam.
Prophet Muhammad.
Muhammad.
Right. The rise of Islam and the conquest of it's not just you cannot separate the religion from the empire, from the political manifestation of that religion, which is the Arab conquest. So in the 7th century, 622, we have the Hijrah. Okay, Muhammad is moving from Mecca to Al-Madinah, to the city of Yathrib, which becomes the city of the Prophet, Madinah al-Nabi. And very quickly, the Arab there is an Arab conquering or conquest of the Middle East, and many of those who were Aramaic speaking are shifting into Arabic speaking, and alongside turning towards Islam in many cases. And the Aramaic stayed as a language of Jews and Christians. Okay? Jews and Christians. There were some influences of the Aramaic over the dialects of Arabic that were spoken in different places. You should understand that sometimes we are looking at Arabic and thinking of it as a monolith, right? As a language. Oh, in Morocco they speak Arabic, in Saudi Arabia they speak Arabic, but the speaker from the streets of Jeddah and the streets of Rabat, they don't have mutual intelligibility. They're unable to talk to one another and understand one another. It's, I don't know how well Australian would communicate with a Scotsman, okay, but it's really, in Arabic you have a situation where the standard language is the language of the Quran, the Fusha, Lughat al-Arabiya al-Fusha, which enables them, to have some common grounds. But the dialectal situation in Arabic is serious. The reason I'm mentioning it is because the Arabic that is spoken in Syria is, to an extent, affected by the Aramaic that was spoken there before. Okay? Now, alongside this change, some small communities did preserve the Aramaic. Okay?
Netanel,
Yeah.
I hate to interrupt you. How old is the Arabic? How far
Arabic,
back did it go?
it's a very good question. The Arabic as a spoken language is probably very old. As a written language, it wasn't recorded very, until fairly recently. Okay, not much before the rise of Islam. So essentially, while Arabic itself is probably old, again, only based on what it preserves in the comparison to other languages, as far as the writing of it, we don't have a lot of writing in Arabic in an earlier period. So that's the it's both early and late in comparison to Hebrew and Aramaic. It is
And they have their own alphabet and everything.
no, but that the alphabet is later. The alphabet is later. But
Okay.
again, when you ask how old is the Arabic,
Yes.
as I said, it's a little bit complicated because while the script and the writing is late, relatively late, okay, it is it is the language itself has ancient sources, okay. So do you see my point?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, and it's very hard to know when was it spoken, as
And
far
why would they not have just kept the Aramaic, Netanel?
oh, the people, because okay, Islam comes with Arabic. The language of the language of the Islam, oh, if you're a Muslim in Indonesia and you want to be serious, you have to learn the language of the Quran. It's the Quran has a very, it's not like the New Testament to Christians. The Quran is more like Jesus to Christians than the New Testament to the Christian. You would think that, the Quran to a Muslim would be like the New Testament to a Christian or the Bible to a Christian. But it's really more than that. Okay, the Quran itself, in a sense, in some senses, is more like Jesus to a Christian. You have to.
I understand the very words, everything about it is
and
holy to them.
Not just holy, but it's the proof of God for them.
Okay.
It's the proof of the language of the Quran is the proof of its validity. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So modern Aramaic, again, there are some communities that preserved the language of the Aramaic. One of those communities is the community of the Jews of the area of Zacho. The area of Zacho is an area in what we call Kurdistan, or the northern part of Iraq, between Iraq and Turkey. Okay, and it might be the place of biblical Chavor, where some of the 10 tribes were exiled to that region. Okay, and
Is it the place? Sorry to interfere. Is it the place where the Yazidis were?
Not too far. It's not exactly the same. But the Jews in that region, it's mentioned. It's interesting that you're mentioning. It's interesting that you're mentioning the Yazidis, because the Yazidis, okay, are in a sense, the Yazidis suffered similar difficulties like the Jews in that region. They're both in Kurdistan. In that sense, it's the area. It's the same area, but it's not the same city. Okay? Okay. So it's the same region, Kurdistan, or not too far from Nineveh. Okay? In the area of Sinjar. Okay? Yeah. So that's the Yazidis. Again, this is from the Maronite Christians, which is not the same as the Assyrians of the East. There are differences there, and maybe we'll talk about it on Thursday when Dr. Yaakov Moz joins us. And now I want to also cover the adjective and some of the uses